This is Reah, and this is Just the Who of Us, where we talk about a range of topics, including life events, current events, spirituality, entertainment, family relationships, as well as answering listener questions and more. Today with us, we have Adrienne back, and we are going to be discussing handling grief and grief recovery and grief coaching, as Adrienne is a grief coach. And, if you listen to her last episode, she explained kind of a little bit about her, what got her into or, interested in grief coaching, her life experiences with losing children. And today we're going to talk about a little bit more kind of focus on that grief coaching and grief recovery. So thank you so much for being back. And this topic is really kind of, I try to focus on this, it's around the holidays. So this is a perfect conversation. And I'm glad to have you here for this year to talk about grief coaching.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'd like to share some of the tools that I've learned because, everyone eventually has to go through grief at some point. So,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's, I don't know if funny is the word, but funny, ironic, I guess, that usually we kind of focus on, um, grief in the sense of like immediate loss. But this year is a little bit different, and I'm excited about that because it's something that I can relate to as I'm still going through the grief of losses that happened a year ago, 2 years ago, kind of thing. And while I've enjoyed in the past talking about immediate loss, this year it's a little more personal to talk about kind of grief recovery rather than grief from immediate loss. And so I'm really glad that you were able, we met, and this is one thing that you are more, I guess, not more familiar with, but it's been some time has passed since you've experienced the losses that you've experienced. And so it just kind of makes it more, I guess, more appropriate to have you on and talk about this. So the holidays are a time that kind of it can be really exciting for people, and it can be really kind of depressing for other people. I know, like my mom, I love the holidays, like everything about it. I want to do all the decorating, I want to do all the things, right? And my mom is kind of like she enjoys it, but it's also a time of kind of seasonal depression for her. And that's part to do with like health and the weather, the cold on, on her body and things like that. But, it can be a very exciting time, and it also can be it can be a little depressing time. And so hopefully, if you are listening and seasonal depression and grief is something that you kind of struggle with, hopefully we can provide you some coping mechanisms from experience and, and education to help guide you through this difficult time. Um, so first of all, I want to kind of start off, give us a little just kind of a recap of, your last episode here. We talked about the loss of your children and that being, what's that? Oh,
Okay.
um,
I didn't say anything.
oh, and that being, the kind of, um, I cannot think of words today. The drive behind helping others cope through their losses and their grief. If you don't mind, give us just kind of a brief backstory for those who maybe didn't hear that episode.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I lost my daughter in 2018 after a lengthy battle with leukemia. She passed away from graft versus host disease, which was complications from her treatments. She suffered, for a long time before she passed away. And then, 4 months later, my dad got the same cancer she had, and he passed away within 6 weeks. And then my grandfather passed away about a year after that. And
Holy
then
cow.
my son passed away from fentanyl poisoning in 2023. So I just had kind of loss after loss after loss after loss. So I decided to get trained to become a grief recovery coach because I did use that modality as a client, and I found it was helpful. And then it's a modality that once you learn how to do it, you can continue to use that tool. You don't need to pay a therapist, or you can continue to use the tools of
Hmm.
that program. So I really like that about it. And then after that, I wrote my book, The Almost Miracle Years, just kind of going through, you know, if you read the book, you see a lot of the coping strategies I used because it was, a lot of it was grieving before my daughter passed away. I was grieving the loss of her normal life. I was grieving, having a normal kid or that kind of thing. So there's some strategies and like some tips. Well, not really tips, but I mean, through my story, you see how I kind of coped with all that going on.
Yeah. So sorry, I thought I had my lighting situated, but um, but yeah, it's first of all, wow, because that's a lot. And as I have not experienced the loss of children, but I've experienced the loss of friends and family members to anything from murder to old age. And so, especially when it kind of comes back to back to back like that, it seems initially like something like I'm never going to get over this. And it's something that it took me a long time to realize that I'm not going to get over it, right? Like, I'm never going to just be like, okay with this. But there are ways and strategies that I can heal from it and learn to not only cope with my grief, but acknowledge my grief and experience it in a healthy way. And I think that's kind of something that we kind of neglect a lot in our grief is coping in a healthy way.
Mhm.
Or even acknowledging that we can cope in a healthy way because you're going to go through the stages of grief regardless, right?
Mhm.
And, the main kind of focus in grief recovery is, okay, how can I do this in a healthy manner? Because I'm going to
Mhm.
experience. Um, so my grandmother passed a year ago, and I there was a lot happened at her funeral. The family dynamics have changed, and last year holidays were different, and they're going to be different this year, and it's a big adjustment. There's a lot around that death, and well, wow, my grandma was 97, so it's like, she was old, so that I'm not having a ton of struggle with that,
Yeah.
but her house is being sold this year by, right at the holidays. And so I feel like I'm struggling more with that than the actual loss of her because she passed away of old age. She had a good solid 97 years. She had a great life. She enjoyed her retirement, and so I'm comforted by all those things. And I actually got to say goodbye to her a couple days before she died. So it's like I'm at peace with that. But the most difficult thing for me is her house. Like,
Mhm.
that's been my grandma's house my whole life, and now it's just like not anymore. And it's crazy because it's to me it seems like such a natural thing, right? Well, yes, she's not alive anymore, and things are too expensive for any of us to just keep the house and have it sitting there and paying, you know, for all the things you have to pay monthly. And it's logical, but at the same time, it's emotionally, it's really difficult.
Mhm.
So, one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about too was when you're going through grief, some things make sense and some things don't. And,
Mhm.
I logically, I know that this part of my grief makes sense, but also my brain is like, that's so silly.
Yeah.
So I know you briefly mentioned grief coaching and grief recovery coaching.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, kind of your experience with that and what, we know what kind of motivated you to do that, but I
Mhm.
just want to hear from you a little bit about that kind of process and what grief coaching as a whole kind of looks like for you as a coach.
Well, it basically you start like in the grief recovery method, you start with your entire life, like your first thing you remember, and then it helps you to identify all the grief throughout your entire life. So, I mean, it can be loss of a marriage, it can be loss of status, it can be, you know, a friendship falling by the wayside, it could be, obviously death of loved ones, it could be pet death, it could be, you're an empty nester, you're grieving being a mother. Like there's all different types of grief. So I found that in getting your clients to acknowledge that it's not just someone died, that's your only grief you've ever experienced in your life. There's many different types of grief and many different severities, and some things I found helpful with that modality is some things you might not have realized were caused you grief have caused you grief. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
and then you really identify your feelings and your thoughts around these events, and it just helps kind of organize them better in your brain.
Yeah, no, that's a really good thing to point out too, because that's something I've realized in my healing journey is that, like you said, the last thing to happen isn't your only thing to happen. And so, what is kind of like your advice for someone who's experienced all those things?
Well,
Start at
it's
the
good to
beginning,
sit
right?
down, and it's good to sit down and like in that grief recovery, they do a timeline, and you sit down and do a timeline of your like for your very first memory, and everything you've ever experienced, and then just to kind of even look at it even objectively and maybe acknowledge it, and then at least it's dealt with. If you just never realized it was grief, or um, you never realized how much of a big loss, say for example you lost a job or something like that, but if you take the time to organize it, write it down on paper and see like, oh, okay, this did affect me, that affected me, and then just to be able to label it and acknowledge it really helps unpack, the backpack. They talk about having a backpack. Throughout your life you get, it keeps collecting stones, and then by the time something really big happens it's full. So then the timeline, the grief timeline, basically is unpacking that backpack one stone at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so when I started therapy, I started cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the things that, my therapist presented to me was, I'm going to ask you this question, and I want you to go through and every time this scenario has come up in your life, I want you to talk about that and answer that question. And I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I didn't really think about I didn't really think about starting there. So that's a really important point because, like you said, the last thing that happened to us is what we're thinking about in the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
that's it's kind of like the backpack being a great example. Like this backpack is filled to the brim right now, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just feeling the weight of the last boulder. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the most recent one because it's got the weight on the top. And so that's a phenomenal point is, also the way that we work through the current things is starting at the beginning. When did this
Mm-hmm.
start piling on top of you? Because typically when we feel that like that kettle, the fumes coming out, it's not because just one thing happened. It's a
Mm-hmm.
buildup of pressure.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Um, So one thing that for and I keep referring back to my grandmother because it is the most recent thing that happened. But one thing for my mom, when my grandma passed away, I suggested to her, she kept having kind of nightmares because she was there when my grandma actually passed.
Hmm.
And she was like, I wake up and I keep, like replaying the scenario in my head. And I suggested to her take a picture of my grandmother from when she was happy and
Hmm.
put that in her bed with her. And so
Hmm.
then when she wakes up out of that nightmare, she can look at that picture and have that happy memory again. Um,
Hmm.
what is something that you suggest, for when people grief is a difficult process and it's a very lengthy
Hmm.
process, or something or some things that you suggest when people come to you and they're like, I just can't get past this thing, this difficult, this nightmare, this memory, this, the guilt or, something like that when they come to you and they're like, I just can't get past this.
Well, a thing that I would encourage is for them to reframe it. So like, for
Mm,
example, my son, well, both my kids, I spent a lot of time with them because of their like, because my son had a heavy drug addiction and I basically had him under house arrest. And
yeah.
so, at the end of the day, I lost them both. But then I go back to how much time did I get to, like, I try and find the silver lining. Like, I spent more time with my kids probably than most people do in their lifetime because of the struggles they had. So I was always there. And I try and just reframe it that look at what was positive out of that. What was positive? What did I learn? And ways to keep them alive. Like I talk about them all the time. I take, their anniversary days off and spend the day for myself and just honor them. And I think really just trying to, instead of being consumed by the pain, it's just like, well, with the pain, there was this great love. And I try and remember that, it wasn't easy, but there was positive things in that time I got to spend with them.
Yeah, that's a great, it feels like one of those things that's kind of not easy to say, but difficult to say and kind of easy to do because when you think
Hmm.
about it, it's kind of like it makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
My cousin actually suggested that to me as well, and I was like, that it makes sense because what else am I going to do, right? I'm going to sit here
Can't
and I'm
change
going to
it.
be sad and yeah, like I can't control it. What am I going to do? So it's difficult for us as the one grieving to think that, and it seems like something so simple, but it's something that's like you just don't think about it unless somebody points it out because you're so kind of stuck in this sad place. But it really does. It really is helpful. Um,
Yeah, that and also I would say I have a heavy belief in the afterlife, and I believe that my kids send me signs, and and I'll go see a medium if I'm feeling like I miss them. And it just that knowledge that, energy is not created or destroyed, it just changes forms. And I know that, I mean, they're not gone, they're just gone from this place where I can see them.
right.
So I find that really helpful to think, they're doing some more important work somewhere else.
Yeah. After my grandma passed, my mom told me a couple of times, she was like, I keep seeing this butterfly. And this is actually she's not the first person that I've heard like use a butterfly as a reference, but
Hmm.
she was like, I kept seeing this butterfly and I saw it multiple times and it looked like the same butterfly, but I'd be outside and I'd just be sitting there, and I'd be kind of down and the butterfly would just come and like fly over to me and like it just felt like my mom was saying like, hey, it's okay, kind of thing, like the symbolism of something
Hmm.
coming to you and comforting you. Um, the afterlife, we're gonna actually dive a little bit deeper into that on another episode. So make sure you guys tune back in for that. But it's something that it's really comforting because whether it's something you believed before or something, you kind of believe in or you don't, either way, it is comforting because, well, for one, we don't really, I don't feel, we don't really know. It's
No.
it's like other things, like we learn about them and we hear them and we might even believe them, but
Mhm.
I've never passed on, so I don't know. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that kind of like regardless, that's comforting to me, even if it's something that I don't necessarily, not saying that I don't, but not, even if it's something you don't necessarily believe in, things like that are, especially when it comes to terms of like coaching, and
Mhm.
providing support for someone else, it is something that is comforting.
Mhm.
And that's another important component of grief coaching as well is,
Mhm.
we're providing support to someone else. And sometimes they may believe in things that we don't, and
Mhm.
that's fine.
Mhm.
How do you approach, and I know the answer to this, but I'm just gonna ask just for the purpose of conversation, but how do you approach those kind of moments where they're like, well, this is what I believe, whether it be religion or
Mhm.
spirituality or neither, this is what I believe, and this helps me cope.
Mhm. How would I approach someone? Well, I would just say like, everyone has their own beliefs, and this is my belief, and it's up to you. Like, if you want to, if you believe in heaven, for example, or if you believe in reincarnation, for example,
Yeah.
they're all very similar in that life still goes on, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you, the bottom line is through most religions and spiritual beliefs is similar in that in some way or another it continues. So I would just respect whatever they affiliate with, and just, for the most part, I mean, if there is someone that says, I don't believe in anything, you're dead, it's gone, that's it, I would just say, well, maybe just keep your eyes open. Maybe you'll notice something, and if you have an open mind, maybe it might make you feel better.
But that's a really good answer though, because
Mhm.
I kind of I already knew what you were going to say, but like I said, I wanted to ask anyway, just for purposes of conversation. But I also wanted to point out that uh, in coaching, grief coaching specifically, it is important to
Mhm.
just be supportive, and
Mhm.
that's one thing that if you're someone who is looking for a grief coach, that is something that if you have the right coach for for you,
Mhm.
for example, you will have someone who is supportive of you no
Mhm.
matter what beliefs may differ. Like we're
Mhm.
not here to teach belief systems,
Mhm.
but it is a thing. I think a lot of people don't consider grief coaching because a lot of people are kind of anti-therapy,
Mhm.
or they just don't understand it. And surprisingly, my mom, for example, I didn't think that she would be open to a grief coach, and she actually is. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's great.
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of people sometimes, like I said, don't understand necessarily what it entails. Um,
Mhm.
and if you're someone who's kind of anti-therapy, you might be against it for that reason, but
Mhm.
it's really not. It's different in a sense. We still have kind of like we have this code of ethics to follow,
Mhm.
but it's a more relaxed space and it's a
Mhm.
little more personal. Um, you
Mhm.
know, and so I just wanted to kind of put that out there for anybody who is considering it but hesitant. And you can also reach out to Adrienne and she can give you, whatever information you need to.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know, I just think it's really important. And I think even just in the moment, if you're doing the work, if you don't think it's helping, even just organizing your thoughts a little bit does help, because
Yes.
it's owning it and it's acknowledging it.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
that's like your first step, right? Like in the healing journey. So I think, yeah, even if you don't think it's helpful, it is helpful just to organize your thoughts a little bit around whatever it is you're grieving.
Yeah. You briefly, and I think this was in the last episode, we briefly talked about finding joy after loss. And so I want to kind of talk about that a little bit too. And I know we kind of covered it a little bit, but I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper. You know, it can be hard when you are, especially when you're in kind of like a heavy point of your grief, maybe experiencing a little depression even. It's, and specifically around the holidays, because depending on where you live, there can be a lot going on.
Mhm.
I always like to tell people, don't do more than you want to do. Like,
Mhm.
holidays is a time also where you don't have to do all the things.
Mm-mm.
While it's good to get out and
Mhm.
socialize and not kind of stay in that box, but you also don't have to do all the things. I feel like
Mhm.
every single year I slide that in there somewhere. You don't have to do all the things. Um, tell, tell me a little bit about your your kind of approach and philosophy on finding joy in the grief recovery process, specifically around the holidays where it can be a lot going on.
Yeah, so I kind of did a mixture of all the things. Like when I first lost Mackenzie, I completely canceled Christmas. Um, and then I mean, last year was probably the first year I did something. Um, I did, but it's just different. I find it's easier to do something different than to do the same thing and notice the empty chair, right? So, I mean, not that I can do the same thing because the rest of them died too, but but yeah, I just like, oh, I went to friends for Christmas dinner, like that's different. Or, one, I think it was last Thanksgiving, I went for a turkey buffet with a girlfriend, or just it's just whatever you're capable of. And if you're not, like the Thanksgiving before that, I'm pretty sure I just ordered skip the dishes and stayed at home and cried. And I mean,
Yeah,
it's okay to do that. Like if you're, and you don't have to just because people expect you, you can just say, this is my day. And that's how grief is. It hits you in the most, you might be fine on Christmas Day, and then Boxing Day, you're a mess. And then, well, then you don't do anything that day.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I last year was different too, and it was kind of upsetting, but at the same time it was amazing.
Mhm.
Like, just and what I did last year was completely different from anything I've ever done
Mhm.
on Christmas or Thanksgiving my whole entire life. But it was so much fun. Like, it would have been great to do the normal thing,
Yeah.
but I really enjoyed it. And so much so that I'm probably going to do that again this year. And, some aspects of it suck because it's not what I'm used to,
Hmm.
but other aspects of it are like wonderful. And like, I got through it and I was happy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think sometimes we kind of hold ourselves back from that, or
Hmm.
don't think that we can achieve that. But you can, and it really, part of it is kind of perspective as well, because my perspective was not, this is what I'm missing out on. That
Hmm.
thought crossed my mind, but my perspective was more, this is what I'm enjoying. This is, these are the positive aspects of this. This is, I don't have to do 3 hours of driving and, whatever the case may be. So I think, with anything, perspective is important too, and really kind of focusing on the things that are going on and
Hmm.
not well, this is what would have or usually, or,
Hmm.
for me, and for you, I would imagine too, as a mother, it's kind of, it's easy to think about, okay, well, this is different and that's a bad thing because I don't have this person around or these people around, or and I say as a mother because we are usually spending our time focusing on other people.
Hmm.
And when we don't have to do that, or we're unable to do that, it can kind of feel like we're missing, or like missing out on something. Because
Mhm.
and I want to just kind of speak to mothers too, in the sense of like, when things change and we don't have to do something, we don't have to take care of everybody, because you also mentioned not just grief of death, right? Like grief of children getting older. I don't, like me, like my house is a little emptier than I'm used to, and I don't have as many people to take care of. Like I
Mhm.
don't have to cook dinner for 7 people anymore.
Mhm.
Part of it is like, it's a little sad because what do I
Mhm.
cook that doesn't feed 7 people? Like I don't know. You know?
Yeah, I went to cooking from 5 to 1.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like, oh, like, how do I do this? But then, at the same time, okay, well, here's the positive perspective of it, that I don't have to cook as much. I don't have to buy as much. I don't have to clean up as much. And even last year, doing things differently, like I hosted at my house. So there was like, I did clean up that year, but I didn't
Mhm.
have to drive for 3 to 4 hours, depending on where I was going, or, stuff like that. And the grief aspect of it too is, I want to kind of circle back to what you said on, it's not just about death
Mhm.
of a person. It can be the passing of certain traditions, or
Mhm.
certain
Or
things.
the house being gone. Like my grandfather, when he passed away, I had to sell that house, and still have nightmares about selling that house because that was the only house I knew of as my family home for that's the only stable home, right? And it was
Right.
a huge hit, like because that was where you always went. Someone was always
Yeah.
home, and it's someone else lives there now.
Oh, I'm not ready for that. But I also live about an hour away now, so I'm not around that house all the time.
Mhm.
And we stopped last year. We didn't go over there for gatherings and stuff like that. So it's kind of like I'm a little more used to that already. Like that
Mhm.
tradition's already changed. And so, but yeah, it's like, okay, well, I don't live there anymore. So it's not like I see it all the time. And kids are older. It's not like we all have a bunch of little kids and we're not going to gather in this one place anymore, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's yeah, sometimes it is just the like, these traditions change, and
Mhm.
that's hard. But then we also look at, okay, well, now I can create new traditions, because that's what typically happens, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
when the matriarch of the family passes,
Mhm.
then that daughter or son becomes the head of the family, and then you have your own
Mhm.
individual families that you're the head of, and then you
Mhm.
modify those traditions and stuff like that. So it can be difficult, but it's possible to kind of navigate and readjust.
Yeah, for sure.
um I want to kind of like, in the spirit of focusing on that, the the fact that this grieving process doesn't necessarily, when I talk about it, I talk about typically in relation to death.
Mhm.
But I do want to kind of make sure that we spend some time focusing on other aspects, because to me, death is most relatable, and to yourself, that grief is most relatable through death, I would imagine.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of people who that doesn't apply to.
Mhm.
And so, what I'm just curious, what other kind of experiences have you learned about as a grief coach from your clients? Or like, what other kind of things do people bring to you, so maybe we can provide some coping mechanisms to the audience on those topics as
Oh,
well?
just a lot of people in the grief world will have different type. Like for example, I do a stocking for my kids. So I do a stocking, and it's just like their favorite candies, and between Christmas and New Year's, I'll eat them and think about them. But just even having that little ritual of I would I'm still doing something for them.
Yeah.
and that mothering, if you feel like, oh, she would like this, he would like that. So it's kind of, that's what I do. Or other people might set an empty chair at the table, or they might, play their favorite song or put a picture of them at the table. So I mean, I think just some people are really uncomfortable with that, but I think it needs to be more normalized. Like we need to be okay with that. Like, so here's grandma sitting beside us. It's a photo of her, but like her energy is still there, or her, the memory of her is still there. And I think that more people need to do those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's great. Actually, I think I might do that this year with the photo. So at my house, I have this china cabinet, and so on the wall right behind, or kind of above the cabinet, and sitting on the top of the china cabinet, I have photos of relatives that have passed, on mine and my husband's family. And so that's kind of, they're there all year round. They're there, and that's kind of like our little tribute to them. And one of my dogs had to be put down, so her little clay paw is up there, and then I have like a thing with both dogs' names on it. Her name is on it, and so just little kind of like memorabilia, to where like, there's, and then I added my grandma, they're still here with us in our thoughts. They're still, like
Yeah.
they're still part of the family. So
And I believe that they do come around those times of years. Um, Whether you can sense them or not is a different story, but I really think that they do.
yeah, yeah. I want to talk a little bit too about other things like financial losses. Losses of, I mean, I guess finance would be the big, but you mentioned like losing like a family home, or, like
Mhm.
losing a job or something like that. And those things they can affect how you spend your holidays.
Oh,
Um,
for sure. Yeah, like I'm, pretty struggling financially since my son passed away. I had to take time off work and, the funeral and that kind of
yeah,
thing. And it is, uh, you just have to, do things differently. Um, like I'll still have people over, but maybe now it's a potluck, because I can't afford to feed everyone.
right, right.
Right? Or things like that, or even like loss of a relationship. Like you could just have like a girlfriend Christmas, or well, that's kind of what we did last year because like both of us were single and we had a great time. Like it was fun. But I think just changing things up a bit, as opposed to trying to hold on to the exact same traditions, I think that's almost harder. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. There was one year that my husband was like, it's been a rough year. I really want to spoil the kids. And he spent like $1,000 on each kid for Christmas. And
mhm.
I'm over here like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
that's insane. First of all, you're setting them up. Now they want the same thing next year. Like we usually, spent a good bit on the kids, but not $1,000 each. We have five
Mhm.
children, like what are
Yeah.
we doing here? And then so the next year, paying on credit cards and things, we're like, oh, we can't do that this year. And I just wanted to be like, we didn't have to do that the first year. But I
Mhm.
think also sometimes too, when we have kids, or even like maybe there's a relative who likes to spend money, and we're over here like, okay, or like the parent that's not in the home, like they like to go all out, and we feel the pressure, right? We're like,
Mhm.
okay, I have to bring the expensive gifts, I have to spend all the money because I
Mhm.
have to keep up with them, and everything like that. And you don't. you
Mhm.
you don't. And especially when it comes to kids, like, having conversations with them and being honest, like, we normally do blah, 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 but this year it's going to be a little bit
Mhm.
different. I had that conversation with my kids last year because I just did Dirty Santa. Um,
Mhm.
and they were like, cool. Like they didn't care that everyone wasn't bringing them a gift. Like my 16-year-old, who was 15 at the time, was like this was great. I love this. Can we do this again next year? Kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like she had the best time, and
Mhm.
she's a little bougie, so
Mhm.
But sometimes it's just like having conversations with people or, especially kids like, all right, things are going to look a little different this year,
Mhm.
and you'll be surprised at how resilient kids are typically. Like,
Mhm.
really, if you're doing something more meaningful, they'll probably enjoy that more anyway. Or,
Oh, for sure.
if someone has recently passed and, sometimes we want to fill that void and kind of distract with buying things and whatnot. And people really enjoy the more sentimental things and the
Mhm.
time and everything more than they do the money that's being spent most of the time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I used to always tell people, don't even buy the kids presents. Like they're spoiled. Like I'd rather go on a family trip or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, so on my grandma's side, there's three of us cousins, and then we all have five, six, and seven kids. And
Hmm.
so imagine, and then my mom had my uncle, his wife, and my mom. And so imagine she bought like three gifts for everybody at one time.
Holy smokes, that's crazy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
When all the kids were
Yeah.
little. And then we
Yeah.
each bought everyone something. So we left with like, I don't even know, like tons of gifts, each
Yeah.
one of us. So like like everybody there bought everybody there something. And then my grandma would buy each person like three things. So that was when the kids were really little, like,
Hmm.
and so, but then the older we started getting, she's like, all right, look. Y'all can get one thing each, and that
Hmm.
thing has a price limit because, it's a whole
Hmm.
bunch of people. But, again, like I did I actually introduced Dirty Santa to my family
Hmm.
a few years ago on both
Hmm.
my mom's and dad's family, and we just started doing that. And so for the kids, we did not Dirty Santa, but uh what is it called? It's like I can't remember the name of it. It's we did like a modified, like a kid version,
Hmm.
for them. And so, we just kind of, because it's just a lot of people. And on my father's side of the family, there's a lot of people too. And then I have five kids, my sister has four, so it's like, but then a few years ago, I was like, hey, why don't we do this?
Hmm.
Secret Santa, that's what it was. The kids did Secret Santa, the adults
Hmm.
did Dirty Santa or
Hmm.
White Elephant, whatever you want to call it. And
Hmm.
and everybody's loved that. Every year since then, that's what we do at our family functions. And it's less expensive and it's fun and everybody
Hmm.
loves it and it's less
Hmm.
expensive.
And you
So
don't have a bunch of crap to haul around.
exactly, exactly. Because when I go to my grandma's, I was an hour and 30 minutes to an hour away, depending on, how long ago it was. But I've always been an hour and a half to 2 hours away from my father's family.
Hmm.
So we got to pile everybody up in a car and
Hmm.
then load everything up and then travel all the way back home. And it's a lot. I'm fine
Hmm.
with everybody just having one thing to take home.
Oh yeah, for sure.
you know. So sometimes we have to modify the traditions, but kids are resilient, and as
Mhm.
long as you are communicating with people, they should. And if they don't get it, then maybe just don't involve yourself with them around the holidays because
Yeah.
I'm okay with that too. Like,
Hmm.
if we can't have a mutual respect and understanding and we can't be supportive of one another, then we don't have to be in each other's lives to make each other's lives more stressful.
No,
Like
for sure.
I'm a big, I've over the years, I've become a very big on like just because someone is family, I will never force anyone to have a relationship with someone because they share blood. And I
Hmm.
used to, when I was younger, but
Hmm.
now my kids are older and they're free to decide who they do and they don't want in their lives.
Hmm.
If you are if you refuse to effectively communicate,
Hmm.
I just we don't have to associate. I mean, why have unnecessary stress? But that's
Right.
and I've seen that a lot, a lot. I feel like a lot more people are kind of coming to that conclusion. Like I don't have to keep unhealthy people in my life just because I'm related to them.
Especially because grief can bring out the worst in some people, right? So, I
Yeah,
mean, it could go either way. Either they're the most supportive ever or they have no empathy. So,
yeah,
I mean, and then you choose who you want to surround yourself with.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but communicate though. We have
Mhm.
to be open to effectively communicating as well,
Mhm.
and that can be difficult when you're grieving.
Mhm.
And so, I think also when we are grieving and there's conversations that are difficult to have, it's okay to table them.
Mhm.
Give them some time and space and circle back around when you're in a good headspace. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Um, no, I think we covered like we talked quite a bit about the grief, the benefits of doing some kind of grief type coaching
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
different forms of grief and like some different strategies. I mean, you can use them, I would say use it's like multifactorial. So I mean, you could have one stay-at-home day, you could have one new tradition and one old tradition. You can mix it up.
Yeah.
Anything to try and just, get through a hard time. Because they are hard. But
Yeah.
then I also try and reframe it by thinking of the good Christmases we had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's one I feel like that's like the primary thing
Mhm.
that I hear people talk about when they talk about grief recovery is
Mhm.
focus on the good, you know.
Mhm.
So that's a really solid point.
Yeah.
Um, well, um, tell us where we can find you on social media and find your book as well.
Okay. So my book is called The Almost Miracle Years. It is available on Amazon, Kobo, Lulu, and Barnes and Noble. You can find me. My website is my first and last name, so adrianbender.com. And my contact is on there to email me. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Adrienne Bender. Um, Instagram, it's 80 Bens. And then just Facebook is Adrienne Bender.
Okay.
And that's it.
I feel like there was something else I was going to ask you. Um, and if they are interested in grief coaching,
Mhm.
where can they go to get information or contact you about that?
They they can just email me off my website, my
Okay.
personal email, yeah, or message me on LinkedIn or Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. Um, there's something I was going to ask you. This was more like from my personal knowledge. Um, how, yeah, so this is just for me. How
Mhm.
do you go about obtaining clients? Um,
Oh, a lot of it was work. Like when I first started, I had a website and then I fell and hit my head and couldn't do anything. So then a lot of it's like I work in mental health. So a lot of it is like word of mouth or self referral, or if people see, on my podcast, because I've done about 12 podcasts now, or like just on social media, word of mouth. Yeah, that's usually how it goes.
oh, okay. 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 Yeah, I was just curious because like I focus a lot on the podcast and other stuff, but I don't coach a lot just because like I don't know where to find people. Like,
Yeah, well, I have like because of my history, like I have connections like with the other moms, like I'm in groups with other moms who've lost their kids and stuff like that
okay.
on social media. So yeah.
That makes sense.
Mm.
Okay. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else, I think that's it for this conversation.
Okay. No.
Um, all right. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And our next conversation, you guys can look for her to be back to talk about the afterlife and we kind of briefly touched on that outside of just grief. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth. And so stick around for that conversation, and we will see you next time. Check us out on YouTube at Reah Higgs, ReahHagues. You can also keep up with us on Instagram at Just the Who Podcast.